If you watched the Sonic 3 trailer and didn't get excited, you were probably watching it with your eyes closed. But do you know all the Easter eggs and hidden details in the preview of the biggest game-inspired movie of 2024? As we mentioned in our first video about Easter eggs in the Sonic trailer, one of the standout moments is when Knuckles uses Big Ben as a springboard to make an incredible leap with his fiery fists. And just before he completely smashes the world's most famous clock, you can see that it's showing 3 p.m. This is a clear reference to the fact that this will be the third film in the franchise. Pretty clever of the film's team, don't you think? If you haven't watched the Knuckles series on Paramount's streaming service, you might be wondering why the red character's hands are on fire. This is actually a skill he developed in the series called Flame of Disaster. What's most striking is that in the Sonic 2 movie, the Red Echidna didn't have this ability yet. However, in the Sonic Adventure 2 game, we see that Knuckles did have fire blazing around his fists, making this ability canon. And honestly, seeing Knuckles and Shadow fight is going to be awesome. Check out now the 18 incredible Easter eggs and details you probably missed when you watched the Sonic 3 trailer. So jump on board as we start another Cinewave. Since we're talking about the fight between Knuckles and Shadow, we have to say that Sonic's buddy is going to get quite the beating. And you might not know this, but a lot of Sonic elements are inspired by one of the most successful anime series of all time, Dragon Ball Z. So much so that the Golden Super Sonic, which even appears in the second movie, is pretty much Sonic's version of Goku Super Saiyan. And just like Sonic is Goku, Shadow is pretty much Vegeta, powerful, ruthless, but sometimes good, and when Shadow grabs Knuckles and kicks him in the stomach, it's highly reminiscent of the fighting moves often performed by Vegeta in the anime. One of the most important characters in the third Sonic movie is undoubtedly Dr. Eggman's cousin and Dr. Gerald's granddaughter, all from the Robotnik family, Maria. Although she probably won't appear much in the movie, as she ends up dying at some point in Shadow's past. We see her touching the glass wall of the fluid-filled tube where Shadow is, highlighting the strong fraternal bond between the two characters. As for the Black Hedgehog, Maria was like a sister and the person he loved most. And it's precisely Maria's death, caused by G.U.N, the Guardian Units of Nations, that triggers the Black Hedgehog's attempt to destroy the world. But deep down, the villain isn't really that evil. One of the cool scenes in the trailer is when the Blue Hedgehog runs along the sides of the London Bridge and takes a huge leap to propel himself. This is an Easter egg related to one of the coolest levels in the Sonic Adventure 2 game, where we can guide our character along the bridge and do almost the same thing, running along the cables on its side. This clearly shows that Sonic 3 is truly dedicated to the fans of the games. Besides London, several of Sonic's scenes take place in Japan, probably in Osaka or Tokyo. And that's definitely not a coincidence. Many might not remember, but the company that created the amazing game starring the Blue Hedgehog is Sega. Sega Corporation, also known as Kabushiki Gaisha Sega, was founded in Tokyo way back in 1960. But the most interesting part is that despite being born in the land of the rising sun, the company's founders were American, which is why the name Sega is a combination of the first syllables of their original company name, Service Games, equals Sega. And if you, like millions of others, also love Sega's characters and games, comment below with #Sega. When they arrive in Japan through one of the portal opening rings, we see Tails piloting a combat helicopter. This isn't the first time the Fox from the Sonic games has flown an aircraft. In the 2014 animated series Sonic Boom, and also in the games, we see that Tails has a plane that he built and pilots himself, which ends up being the main means of transportation for Team Sonic on several occasions. Another Easter egg connected to the older productions in the game franchise. And if Tails was a helicopter, of course Shadow would also get a nod to his solo game where he operates various equipment. But the most iconic has to be the motorcycle he rides in the opening scene of Shadow the Hedgehog. In this game, we see the Black Hedgehog engaging in combat against an alien race invading Earth, the Black Arms. This is practically the same motorcycle we see Shadow using in the trailer, which he'll use in several scenes, including pulling off that Akira-style slide. Since we're talking about the solo game of the Black Hedgehog, which became famous for the character using firearms, something that had never happened before in the Sonic franchise, we found another really cool reference to the game. In the scene where we see Shadow taking down everyone as he escapes from prison, he's using his Chaos Snap ability to move around and literally kick the gun guards in the face. This is basically the same thing we see Shadow doing with the aliens in his game, using the same ability, just against a different group of beings. If you, like me, don't live in Japan, you'll definitely have a hard time recognizing the real-world references in the trailer. But don't worry, we've already figured out several of them. For instance, in the scene where we see a power outage happening in the center of Tokyo, the last name to go dark is Q-Front. This is one of the most striking buildings in Shibuya, housing several bookstores and cafes across its 8 floors. This really confirms that the big battle between the movie's characters is going to happen in Tokyo. And it's probably there that Team Sonic spots what Tails calls a giant fireball, likely caused by Shadow. So they all head there, having no idea they're about to get a serious beating. What few people know or remember is that this explosion, and the way the characters talk about it, is an Easter egg referencing the fire shield from the Sonic 3 game. As we mentioned, G.U.N is the organization that's supposed to defend Earth from threats that conventional armed forces can't handle. However, we must point out that in the games, they are enemies of Sonic and all of his friends 99% of the time. But in the third movie, we can see that Team Sonic is even using the organization's equipment, because when we see the 3 characters jumping out of the helicopter, if you pause at the right moment, you'll see the organization's logo, the letter G, on the side of the aircraft. And if you've made it this far and still haven't subscribed, we'll give you one more chance now, or we might have to ask Shadow to pay you a visit. Speaking of him, when Sonic's adversary makes his entrance, we can see it's a truly dramatic one, so much so that Knuckles even remarks that Shadow is way more intimidating than the Blue Hedgehog was when they first met. This is definitely the funniest scene in the entire trailer. What's interesting is that Shadow's entrance is a clear reference to the actual moment in the games when the protagonist first encounters his evil counterpart. Once again, it's evident that this movie is packed with game references for Sega fans. When Knuckles tries to face off against Shadow, just before getting utterly humiliated by the Black Hedgehog and his Chaos powers, we can see an image of a mountain being projected on the screen beside them. This seems to be a reference to Mount Fuji, Japan's tallest mountain and an active volcano. It's a national symbol of Japan. At the beginning of the movie, we see Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles having a race. This is a nod to the competitive mode in the classic Sonic games, where 2 players would race to the end of the level. But honestly, it's unlikely that Sonic will lose to his 2 friends. At one point in the movie, we see Sonic and his friends asking Dr. Eggman for help, and we can see he's in a pretty pathetic state, seemingly eating nothing but junk food. And when Sonic's arch-nemesis goes to the bathroom to change, we see that when he closes the door, the occupied symbol is a little Robotnik face from the Sonic cartoons. Additionally, if you pause the scene at just the right moment, you'll notice that Robotnik's t-shirt has a print of an X-ray of a head, showing both a human brain and a symbol representing something toxic. Furthermore, you can see that the head on the shirt is spewing some kind of liquid from its mouth. This is a perfect representation of Eggman himself, with his extremely toxic mind and a mouth that only spews out evil plans. To help Sonic and his friends, Eggman demands one of the Hedgehog's spines as a condition, just like he did in the previous 2 movies. This hints at the idea that Eggman is collecting energized spines from Sonic to build the greatest villain the games have ever seen, Metal Sonic. He could be the big surprise in the movie. Now that you've checked out all these Easter eggs and references, we're leaving you with 2 video options to watch. One of them might even be the video with the first Easter eggs we noticed in the trailer, along with all the ones you just saw. If I were you, I'd definitely watch it. Thanks, and see you next time!